The HOA president stood on my lawn at sunrise like she owned the oxygen itself, manicured finger hovering inches from the power cord of my premature daughter's life support pod. Mr. Caldwell, Barbara Kensington purred in that honey-dripped voice that always preceded a knife twist. This hideous box violates every aesthetic code in Sunnyvale Estates. Unplug it by Friday or we remove it ourselves. The pod hummed softly, keeping tiny Sophia breathing after her terrifying early arrival, and Barb smiled like she just suggested trimming the roses. I'd been the neighborhood punchline for years, the shady remote worker, who supposedly tanked property values with one parked van, but I'd stayed quiet then. This time the queen of curb appeal had just declared war on my baby's lungs, and the guy everyone underestimated was about to make her regret every pearl she ever clutched. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I simply tilted my head and said, Barbara, that hideous box is a hospital-certified NeoGuard system, feeding live data to the county neonatal network. You're standing inside a monitored medical zone right now. Her Botox-smooth forehead flickered, the tiniest crack in the porcelain mask, before she recovered with a tinkling laugh that could curdle milk. Oh, Ethan, always so dramatic. Rules apply to everyone. We all have hardships, darling, but my hydrangeas don't get a free pass either. Behind her, Mrs. Patel across the street suddenly found her roses fascinating while her phone camera peeked out like a sniper scope. That's Sunnyvale Estates in a nutshell. One big stage where everyone claps for the Karen in charge and films the rest for the group chat. I glanced at the pod's soft green display. Oxygen steady, heart rate fragile but fighting, Sophia's tiny chest rising and falling under the clear dome I'd helped design during those endless NICU nights. Barb saw an eyesore. I saw the only thing keeping my daughter alive outside the hospital. Last year you fined Mr. Ramirez because his flagpole was half an inch too visible from the sidewalk, I said quietly. Now a breathing machine is the real neighborhood threat? She waved her clipboard like a royal scepter. Precisely. Aesthetic harmony is what makes Sunnyvale special. Think of resale values, Ethan. Think of the children. The irony of that last line almost made me laugh out loud, black bitter laughter that tasted like battery acid. She was threatening to kill one child to protect the imaginary future property values of others. When she finally click-clacked away in her sensible heels, the silence felt heavier than her perfume. I crouched beside the pod, brushed condensation from the dome and whispered to Sophia, "We're okay, kiddo. Daddy's got you." Inside the house my wife was still asleep, exhausted from another night of alarms and worry. She didn't need to know yet that the HOA had just issued a death sentence dressed up as a compliance notice. I opened my laptop, archived the violation email, and labeled it Exhibit A, because Barbara Kensington had no idea who she'd just poked. I wasn't some helpless homeowner anymore. I was the guy who wrote the firmware that ran half the ventilators in this state, and I was about to turn her precious rulebook into her downfall. By noon the violation was pinned to the HOA portal like a scarlet letter. Non-compliant external medical apparatus, immediate removal required. The comments rolled in faster than gossip at a country club. It's sad about the baby, but rules are rules. If we make exceptions, the whole neighborhood turns into a junkyard. My cousin had a similar pod and they kept it inside. Why can't he? Not one person asked if Sophia was okay. They just worried about their precious curb appeal. I minimized the tab and checked the pod's live feed. All vitals perfect. The same system I'd built to survive hospital blackouts was now surviving Karen Black hearts. That afternoon the first friendly reminder crew showed up. A security guy named Derek in a polo 2 sizes too tight, camera in hand. "Just need photos for the files, sir," he mumbled, refusing to meet my eyes. I stepped aside so he could get the perfect angle of the pod glowing against my perfectly mowed lawn. "You know what this is?" I asked mildly. He nodded once. "Medical thing for the kid. Tough break." Then he lowered his voice. "Between us, Barb's been gunning for this since you questioned her flag fine last year. She called it, that eyesore that proves he doesn't belong." Derek snapped the pictures and left like the lawn was on fire. Across the street Alan Pierce, the retired judge who never said much, stood in his doorway watching. He gave the tiniest nod before disappearing inside. Interesting. The man who'd once quietly voted against Barb's craziest proposals was still on the board. Maybe not everyone drank the Kool-Aid. I spent that night building my arsenal. Dual redundant batteries, secondary cellular backup, cameras feeding straight to an encrypted cloud only I and the hospital could access. Every wire, every sensor now had a digital witness. Barb wanted to play power games? Fine. I'd make sure the game was recorded in 4K and timestamped for the state medical board. By morning another email arrived. 72-hour final notice before enforcement action. Attached was the neighborhood charter highlighted in screaming red. I printed it, laminated it, and taped it beside the pod with a cheerful little post that read, "For your records, Barbara, smiley face." The board meeting was held in the clubhouse that smelled like lemon pledge and desperation. Barb sat at the head table like a queen on her throne, flanked by her loyal echo chamber. Linda, who worshipped uniformity, and Victor, who once tried to ban wind chimes because they disturbed the aesthetic peace. I sat 3 rows back in a plain gray shirt, blending in like I always had. Barb tapped her gavel. Item 3. The unfortunate situation on Lot 17. Unfortunate. As if Sophia's lungs were a landscaping issue. She read the violation with theatrical sorrow. We sympathize, truly, but if we allow exceptions, the floodgates open. Tomorrow it's a pod. Next week someone's installing a hot tub shaped like a dolphin. Victor chuckled. Linda nodded like a bobblehead. Alan stared at his agenda like it might bite him. When public comment opened, I stood. The NeoGuard is registered with the state as life-sustaining equipment under ADA protections. Removing it risks immediate harm. Any board member who interferes will answer to more than just unhappy neighbors. Barb's smile tightened. Threats won't change policy, Mr. Caldwell. Not a threat, I said softly. A fact. And every word of this meeting is now being recorded by the same hospital servers monitoring my daughter's oxygen. The room went graveyard quiet. Even Linda stopped nodding. 2 nights later the power cut. Not the house, just the pod. My phone screamed at 2:17 a.m. Backup battery engaged. I sprinted outside barefoot, heart hammering louder than the compressor. The external solar line had been sliced clean through. Someone had even taken the junction box cover as a souvenir. I rerouted manually, watched Sophia's vitals stabilize, then pulled the security footage. The camera had been jammed for exactly 6 minutes, but the angle caught a figure in a reflective vest. No name tag, no logo, crouching exactly where Barb's maintenance crew had been the day before. I didn't call the sheriff yet. I called the hospital compliance officer instead and uploaded everything. This wasn't vandalism. This was attempted murder dressed in HOA stationery. The next morning a certified letter arrived. Forced removal scheduled for Friday. Signed personally by Barbara Kensington. I stared at her looping signature and felt something cold settle in my chest. She'd gone from finding flagpoles to cutting oxygen lines. Time to stop playing defense. I drove to the hospital that afternoon and met Dr. Rena Valdez in her office. She watched the footage without blinking. This qualifies as interference with life-sustaining equipment under State Statute 54. I'm filing an immediate compliance alert. One more incident and the entire board loses liability insurance. She slid 2 forms across the desk. First certifies the pod as protected medical infrastructure. Second is a pre-litigation notice to their insurance carrier. They touch it again, their premiums skyrocket and their lawyers run for the hills. I took the papers like they were gold. Rena, thank you. She didn't smile. Keep Sophia breathing. I'll handle the rest. Back home I laminated the notices and attached them to the pod in bright red. Then I routed every camera feed to a private stream labeled, Live Oversight Sunnyvale Estates. Access granted to Rena, the state board, and crucially retired Judge Helena Cross, who lived 3 doors down and had watched Barb's reign with growing disgust. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for Barb to walk into it wearing her favorite heels. Friday morning arrived bright and cruelly perfect. The kind of Sunnyvale day Barb loved to brag about in the newsletter. I sat at my kitchen window with 3 monitors open, coffee untouched, watching the feed like it was the Super Bowl. 8:47 a.m. A white unmarked van rolled up. 2 guys in generic coveralls stepped out carrying a dolly and bolt cutters. Barb stood on the sidewalk in her signature blazer, arms crossed, directing traffic like a general who'd never lost a battle. She didn't knock. She didn't call. She just nodded once and the crew opened my gate like they owned the place. The moment the first glove touched the power line, my system lit up red. Unauthorized entry. Power disruption 4.8 seconds. Live alerts blasted to hospital, state compliance, and Judge Cross's private line. I didn't move from my chair. I let them keep going because this time the whole world was watching in real time. Judge Cross's voice cut through the feed like a scalpel. Step away from that device immediately. She strode into frame in a charcoal blazer, folder in hand, looking every inch the appellate judge she used to be. The workers froze. Barb spun around, face flushing the color of cheap lipstick. This is private enforcement, Helena. You're retired. You have no standing here. Judge Cross didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Actually, I have standing under emergency residential protection statutes and a direct request from the State Compliance Board. This pod is now under active ADA investigation. Any further interference and every board member becomes personally liable. She handed the nearest worker a notice. Your employer's insurance will drop you faster than you can say, wrongful endangerment. I suggest you leave. The bolt cutters hit the pavement with a beautiful metallic clang. One guy actually muttered, "Sorry, ma'am," before backing away. Barb stepped forward, voice cracking for the first time. This is harassment. I'm just enforcing the rules. Judge Cross turned slowly, eyes ice cold. Rules don't trump attempted homicide, Barbara. And we have video of you personally approving the power cut 2 nights ago. Barb's mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish drowning on dry land. The van peeled out so fast it left rubber on the street. The same street Barb had once fined someone for parking 2 inches over the line. I finally stepped onto the porch. Barb's eyes locked on mine and I saw the exact second she realized the quiet guy she'd spent years slandering had just filmed her committing a felony in 4K. You're done, I said simply. She tried one last sneer. This isn't over. But her voice shook. Judge Cross escorted her off my property like a bouncer removing a drunk from a wedding. The pod kept humming, untouched, alive. And for the first time in weeks I let myself breathe normally. The HOA portal went radio silent that afternoon. No new violations. No snarky emails. Barb's name quietly disappeared from the next meeting agenda. But quiet in Sunnyvale Estates never meant surrender. It meant regrouping. I knew she'd try something. People like Barb don't stop until the cost of continuing becomes unbearable. So I made the cost nuclear. I called Alan Pierce that evening. He answered on the second ring, voice tight. I saw the footage Judge Cross shared. Jesus, Ethan. You sat in that room and let her vote to remove my daughter's oxygen, I said. No anger, just facts. I need a statement. Something that says the board was fully informed this was life support, and Barb dismissed it as emotional manipulation. There was a long pause. Then Alan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. Meet me at the park in 30. I've already written it. Under the pergola he handed me 3 pages, dated, signed, witnessed. It detailed every board email where Barb called the pod, that sympathy prop, and laughed about teaching the remote worker a lesson. I should have spoken up sooner, he admitted. I thought if I stayed on the board I could curb her worst impulses. I was wrong. I folded the statement carefully. This helps more than you know. Alan looked at the pod glowing in the distance. She changed everything, didn't she? One tiny baby. No, I said. We changed everything. We just finally made the neighborhood see it. By Monday the statement was in the hands of the State Oversight Committee, the hospital legal team, and every board member's inbox. Within 24 hours a cease and desist landed on Barb's doorstep from the State Medical Board. The letter was brutal in its politeness. Any further action against the protected medical equipment on Lot 17 would trigger criminal referral, loss of HOA insurance, and possible federal ADA charges. Barb's empire, built on color-coordinated mailboxes and grass-linked tyranny, was suddenly one signature away from collapse. The leaked footage hit the neighborhood newsletter 2 days later. No one ever admitted who sent it, but suddenly everyone had seen Barb crouching by the pod, yanking wires while a baby's heart monitor flashed red. The comments section exploded. "I thought it was just rules. My mother uses oxygen. Would they unplug her too?" We all knew Barb was intense, but this? Even Mrs. Patel posted a single line. "I'm ashamed I stayed silent." The board called an emergency Zoom that night. Barb's square stayed black. She didn't dare show her face. Alan unmuted first. His voice was steady for the first time in years. "I moved to suspend President Kensington pending full investigation." Linda, the same Linda who'd once called me dramatic, actually seconded it. Victor tried to sputter something about due process, but the vote passed 3-0 before he finished the sentence. Barb was removed before she could even log on. The silence that followed felt like the whole neighborhood finally exhaling. The town hall the next Saturday was standing room only. People who never came to meetings showed up clutching printed screenshots of Barb mid-wire cut. Judge Cross took the floor without being invited. "What happened here wasn't about rules," she said, voice carrying to the back row. "It was about control." One woman decided a baby's life was less important than perfect lawn lines. "That ends today." She laid out the state investigation in calm, devastating detail. Alan followed with his statement, voice cracking only once when he admitted his own silence. Then, in a twist no one saw coming, Linda stood up and called for Barb's permanent removal plus a full audit of the last 3 years of fines. "I followed her because it was easier," she said quietly. "I won't make that mistake again." The vote was 87-1. The single holdout was Victor, who immediately resigned. Barb's name was scrubbed from every plaque, every newsletter, every trophy case in the clubhouse. The new interim board, led by Alan, announced an emergency review of all bylaws with mandatory ADA compliance training. Human dignity was suddenly part of the handbook. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. 2 weeks later, I peeled the red laminated notices off the pod. Not because the danger was gone. Bad Karens always find new clipboards, but because the message had already been delivered in affidavits, insurance cancellations, and the sudden politeness of every neighbor who now waved when they walked past. Sophia was gaining weight. Her lungs were strengthening. She'd outlasted the entire HOA board. One Sunday morning, I lifted her out of the pod for the first time in weeks and carried her to the porch bench. Sunlight hit her face and she blinked those brand new eyes at the sky like it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. No alarms. No fines. Just breathing. That was the victory no clipboard could ever take away. Judge Cross stopped by later with a bottle of non-alcoholic sparkling cider. "The State Compliance Board wants you on their advisory panel," she said. "Your documentation set a precedent." I told her I'd think about it. For now, I just wanted to hold my daughter and remember that sometimes the quiet guy wins. A plain envelope slid under my door the next day. No HOS seal, just a neighbor's handwriting. Inside was a note from at least 2 streets over whose husband used a wheelchair. "They denied our ramp twice. Called it unsightly. Thank you for showing us we don't have to apologize for surviving." I folded it next to Sophia's NICU discharge papers and felt something loosen in my chest I hadn't realized was still knotted. The pod stays now, not because I fought the board but because we proved they never had the right to touch it in the first place. They tried to treat my daughter's life like clutter. Instead, they cleared out their own leadership. So here's the question I keep turning over at night. Was Barbara Kensington just a woman enforcing rules, or was she the real danger hiding behind a clipboard and a smile? Drop your answer in the comments. Was the HOA right to demand perfection, or did one baby's breathing machine finally expose how rotten the rules really were? Let me know, because next time it could be your family's pod on the lawn.